Now we're going to leverage technology for our next panel discussion. So they're not physically in the room with us, but that doesn't stop the panel discussion from happening. We're going to watch them on screen. We're going to enjoy this virtual panel discussion, and that's the beauty of technology, that wherever anyone is, we're able to connect with them through technology. So I'd like you to applaud our virtual panelists who will be speaking on adapting global best practices, shaping Nigeria's AI policy for Africa. Join me in welcoming to our virtual stage Margaret Olele, CEO of American Business Council. A warm round of applause. Don't worry, they can hear the applause. Again, the power of technology. We also have Dr. Bumi Ajala, National Director, NCAIR. A warm round of applause, please. Also joining this panel virtually is a partner at PwC in the person of Dr. Nicholas M. Sunder. A warm round of applause, please. And to moderate our virtual panel discussion is from the faculty, Lagos Business School, Dr. Nkem Dilim Iheanacho. A warm round of applause, please. Let them feel the energy here in Victoria Island, in Lagos, at day 3 of the Global Tech Africa Conference 2024. So we have about 30 minutes for this panel, and we will be sending you digital time cards. Maybe when you see me on screen, then you know that time is up. And right after that, we have a talk, and then we'll move to our next panel. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. It's indeed a great honor and privilege to be with you all this afternoon. I'm excited at this very exciting panel, and I look forward to having very interesting conversations. The title of this panel, this panel aims to discuss what it takes to adapt global best practices, specifically in shaping Nigeria's AI policy for Africa. And with me to have this conversation is Nicholas Sunder. Nicholas, has already been introduced, is a partner and lawyer in the government and public sector practice at PwC Germany. He's a member of the German public sector leadership team at the firm and has several years of experience working in digital transformation, procurement, AI, and cybersecurity. We'll also be hearing from Dr. Olubunmi Ajala. Dr. Ajala is the National Director of NCAIR, which is the National Center for Artificial Intelligence and Robotics. Dr. Ajala is a data scientist and an economist with high-level experience in providing expertise to firms, to organizations, and also he currently works with the Honorable Minister at the Federal Ministry of Communication, Information, and Digital Economy. He's previously worked as a banker, he's worked as an academic, and in the United Kingdom, and has worked extensively on the subject of AI and data science. And we're also going to have the privilege of hearing from Mrs. Margaret Olele. Mrs. Olele is currently CEO and Executive Secretary of American Business Council. And to flag off this conversation, this panel essentially would have 3 conversation pasture areas. The moderator has further compressed our time, so we'll try to stick to time. The first conversation pasture would dwell on understanding global best practices for AI. The second conversation pasture would discuss the challenges and opportunities for AI in Nigeria. And then the third conversation pasture would speak to strategic recommendations. And then we'll try to open up the floor to get comments, feedback, and questions from the House. After which will summarize the key conversations and then move forward. In the spirit of speed and time, Dr. Sonder, I'll quickly call on you and I'll ask, what are some of the most successful AI policies you've seen globally, sitting where you sit in PwC? And what has been responsible for making these policies successful? Are there some countries you think Nigeria can learn from, both in emerging and in developed markets?
Thanks a lot for the question, and it's a pleasure to be here and to have this panel with all of you. And maybe next time we do it physically. So really happy to be able to attend here with you. And with respect of time, of course, I come directly to your question. What we see as global best practices. And to be honest, it's a very subjective point of view. A lot of people of us will take here. And because we know some examples which are popular and which are called to be best practices. But the issue is, what is the regulation game and what is also the regulation aim? I give you some examples. We all might know the EU AI Act. So the EU AI Act has considered to be the first supranational regulation on artificial intelligence. So I would say, yeah, that is succeeded without a doubt, because it's an act. So it's not only a directive. What does it mean? It means in European law context, this applies directly for all member states. This is a big move. Why? Because normally on those disruptive digital transformation regulation issues, you have mostly directive where the member states still have a little bit space to play on their own legislation. This is not the case here. So that means not only that there's no national legislation act needed, it's also not allowed by a national legislation act to change the AI Act provision. So it applies directly for all the member states. And of course, this is basically a move. On the other side, also here, to be honest, there has been also some criticism on the AI Act that is too much and more a compliance instrument. And that is what I mentioned at the beginning. What is the regulation aim? So the regulation aim is of the AI Act to follow a so-called risk-based approach. So we have here 4 risk categories on AI, and everything you are allowed to do on AI is related and dependent to those risk categories. So that is also why maybe some people will say very fast, no, okay, it's not an act for innovation. We have to look closer maybe later to evaluate this seriously. But it is a risk-based approach. So I think it's something that also comes from the general history of such regulations on the EU. You know it from the GDPR. It's a little bit more a careful act. Then we have the UN Declaration on Regulation of Artificial Intelligence. And this is also remarkable. Why? Because it's the first time that the responsible committee at the UN found a consensus of all member states to do a declaration on such a digital regulation topic. So this is really the first time that all member states found a consensus to say, yeah, this declaration on how to regulate AI, we will all carry. We all know that a declaration of the UN is not, compared with an EU act, is not binding directly for the member states, but it is a remarkable guidance, a remarkable orientation. And one thing we shall not underestimate, it's binding for the UN itself. So when they will plan budgets for technology push and so on, when they plan budgets for bring regulation on AI further, they have to orientate at this act. And on the other side, this declaration is also a kind of a framework that, of course, has a broader scope than the EU. It's worldwide, and it's not only the European Union. When we come to the content and to look if it's a best practice, it's not like, I would say, in the EU and a compliance instrument. It's more a kind of a sustainable regulation instrument, because the highest good, the highest value in the UN AI declaration is that AI shall be used in a way that it will fulfill the worldwide committed ESG goals. So this is a little bit different, coming from a completely different angle than the EU. The UK now also launched an AI regulation, this is a regulation, we call it, they try to balance innovation and risks. So they have a kind of an innovation part where they say This is how we can trigger innovation. And then they have a kind of compliance part where they say this is more an issue of compliance. And then, and I will give or we'll try to give a short answer. We'll end shortly, no worries. And then we have some regional sectoral best practices, like in Singapore. This is more driven as a soft regulation. And this is more really how to incentive also using AI. And then we have sectoral regulations coming more from specific needs. Like in Canada, there is not an overall AI regulation, but we have one on education where they say, okay, where's a very sensitive sector? I mean, it's obvious that at schools, maybe you have to regulate AI a little bit more than in the entrepreneurship world of startups. So this just as a short overview. So you see, and that is also to give you the last part of the answer, the question when we come now to how could we adopt best practices or compare it or do a matchmaking with a rising champion in Africa like Nigeria is. I think it would be really tricky to say, this is the best example, this is the best. I think you have to look to all, because you see, coming back to the start, the regulation aims are different. We have now risks and compliance. We have ESG, we have innovation, and we have looking more on sensitive sectors like education. So I would recommend to look, where is the AI strategy of Nigeria going on, and then match it with the best pieces and puzzles from all of the global best practices, instead of copying just one. I hope I'm still in time with the first answer. I try to be a little bit more short.
I hope so. I hope so. Thank you so much, Nicholas. So Dr. Ajala, I'll just quickly segue into you. I think Nicholas has done a good job of showing us AI policy frameworks, as well as the wireframes around which the policies were developed in the Eurozone, the UN declaration, the circumstances in the UK, and then Singapore. And then he's also highlighted raising issues like the need to now sort of double dip into sectors to understand the circumstances in the sectors, risks, compliance issues, and then the need to not just copy and paste, but adapt to our circumstances. What, in your view, Dr. Ajala, should be our approach as a country in leveraging these global best practices, especially if we have to develop a robust policy that will address our circumstances and create that groundswell for AI to actually give us a head start in Nigeria? Thank you.
Thank you for this important question. Considering the level of our AI strategy development, so we're already working on a strategy which you could testify to. And if you could observe from the first white paper the Honorable Minister published in August, you could see that what we are doing is that we know this is a knowledge-driven exercise. So what we've done first is we've studied existing AI policies from leading countries, as Mr. Nicholas said. We've looked at the one from the US, we look at the one from UK, we've looked at the one from China, and we look at the one from the EU nations. We also examined the policies from countries with developmental context similar to us. So we look at Mauritius, Rwanda, and Argentina. And that is part of what we've used to design something we feel could be unique to our own situation. And again, moving beyond what these countries have done, to have a kind of a robust AI policy leveraging on best practices, we are engaging with international organizations to ensure we develop a robust AI policy. We have AI Safety Institute report. We've been key partners in that, the scientific report. We've been involved with them. And you could also see that as a part of that, US-Nigerian Summit, AI Summit, is coming up in September as part of leveraging on best practice for us to come up on with AI, global AI policy. Another thing we're doing to leverage on that is our engagement with organizations like UNESCO. So when you see the global AI ethics, for us to ensure that Nigeria is leveraging on the best AI practices, just 6 days ago, the Honorable Minister commissioned the steering committee and the technical committee for ethical adoption of AI in Nigeria. These are part of the ways we're using to make sure we leverage on that. Because of time, we're focusing on education. If you look at it, to make sure, because when you want to leverage on that, you can see things that NIDA, NCA, 3MTT, what we are doing under the ministry to make sure we leverage skill development, all these things. And you, Dr. Nkem, you can also confirm to it, the kind of research we're funding in AI to make sure we leverage on best world practices to design AI strategy for Nigeria.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ajala. Indeed, I think this is probably the first, at the risk of letting the cat out of the bag, the first public peeping you're actually giving us into understanding the full gamut of what the ministry is actually building out in terms of a global AI framework, policy, and strategy for the country. There are a couple of very important things you highlighted, which I think I need to draw out for more emphasis, as also someone who has been actively working with you in this space. The fact that we've looked at global best practices in both developed and emerging markets, we've sort of double dipped to understand what AI is doing in each of the sectors and how AI can, for instance, enable education, enable healthcare, enable security, enable transportation. Also, you've highlighted a lot of the various interventions across the global coordinating bodies like UNESCO, and more specifically, how we are now looking as a country to get AI to address critical issues like education, which we've not been looking very good on historically as a country. So, Maggie, I would segue into you. So as the CEO of American Business Council, you've been very instrumental in getting American businesses to better understand Nigeria, play more developmental roles in Nigeria, and you've also played roles in strengthening that cooperation between the United States, American businesses, and Nigerian businesses. What in your view would be a role, globally? What specific elements of the global AI policies do you think are most relevant to us in Nigeria?
Thank you so much, Nkem, and it's a great pleasure to be on this call, even though some of us had to wake up very early to join this meeting panel. So quite frankly, Dr. Ajala Dr. Bumi has said a lot about the what's been happening in the space, and it's great to know that is great. There's been a lot of focus on responsible AI, which is also very good, ethical and data governance, but also I think we need to focus quite a lot on issues around infrastructure development as an example. The whole idea of building robust digital and computing infrastructure is essential, improving internet connectivity, which, by the way, I know that the Honorable Minister has been doing quite a lot of work to ramp up. Really, even the issues around access to computing resources and developing data centers. So when you even think about the issue around power and energy necessary to kind of collate the level of data that's required, for AI, I think these are super important to look into in terms of relevance. Also, we have mentioned issues around skills and education. We don't want while we're trying to ensure that this enhances education, there's a need to educate people on the skills, and the need for this, and the need to also foster industry linkages between big tech companies and our university to build those kinds of pipeline of capacity growth and local expertise. What we don't want to do as well is to make our students, think that that's all that's required in terms of, we don't have to, it's all about AI and nothing else. I give an example, I tell people that the use of AI can either, for the very smart, would enhance their being smart, but for those who are dull and who would just, embrace without having to use their own skills as well, it would just enhance the level of foolishness that you see. So there's a need to understand that we need to build those linkages between that can help foster local expertise, integrate AI into our educational curricula, and for that reason build local talent. We also have to be cautious about the way it's being deployed in a way that has to be understood and relevant, to the environment. Of course, we need to talk about inclusive development, with a situation where we already have unemployment, and people have this perception or misconception that AI may take over their jobs. And when you think about it, the man on the street, the average African, the average Nigerian, the street hawker, the people who are just, doing stuff at maybe traders at Ladipo, how are they able to understand, the value or the impact and, this revolution as it may look like that that's happening. So we need to address the issues around the digital divide and promote also inclusive growth, inclusive value into this. So there are a couple of other things, honestly, looking at local innovation. So how do we foster linkages between private sector and academia, to grow labs and startups, and really acclimatize them to the point that the other speakers have shared, the need to have local innovation and adapt them to relevant sectors that impact education, agriculture, healthcare. I'll stop at this point.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Maggie. I think you've also done a good job of segueing us into segment 2, which are the challenges. And I think you highlighted a lot of roles that the private sector can actually play in supporting and implementing AI. And one very important thing you also did is that you sounded a note of caution that the youth shouldn't think that AI is now the silver bullet magic combination that solves all problems. They have to remain intellectually active, contributing and thinking about how best they can actually harness the value that would come from AI. You also spoke extensively about responsible AI. I'm just racing for time. So, Dr. Ajala, if I can come back to you, what in your view are the biggest challenges we face as a nation in adopting AI?
Thank you. That's also a very important question for us. But I think Ms. Margaret has made the work easier for me. But because AI is an emerging technology, the world is waking up every day to brazen challenges. And because as a developing nations, we wake up with us. But before I speak on the challenges, and which Margaret has also spoken of course, we should at least highlight the transformative power of this technology. You see how it can affect productivity in agriculture, improve our healthcare, or agriculture, educational outcome, or even the top level security challenges in Nigeria. But when you go beyond this, we're still faced with challenges in adopting this technology. On the open part, you'll be thinking about things about skills and talent we need for this. Data availability and quality of data. You'll be thinking about funding and investment, regulatory framework. You look at limited local AI ecosystem, infrastructure limitations, cybersecurity concerns, cultural and even social acceptance of AI. You look at that. So they're very massive. But if you want to just focus and just take out, beside the regulatory one, you can bring them down to just 3 major points. The human aspect, the challenge regarding to human aspect, the data and algorithm part, and the infrastructure. But I will quickly speak to them that if you look at it, because when you look at this thing, let's look at the human aspect of it. Besides that, what we are doing with the 3MTT to develop human capital and talent for it, in which 5% of 3MTT, which is 150,000 people, will be trained over 3 years. We have control to an extent on the human part. Look at the way we brought in the Nigerian diasporas. Nigeria has a kind of social capital in AI that when you talk about those human capital, look at the young and savvy techie people we have. So we can somehow work as a nation to work on the human part. When you look at the data and the algorithm part, the algorithm, almost anything you want to build, somebody has done something, you can openly source a foundational algorithm online. So we can build with the open source with something that is coming from Meta. Just 48 hours ago, Meta launched Llama 3.1, which is massive. Open source like that, even LLM, you are getting open to it. So algorithm, some of the top, what will have been problems in order, eras, revolutions in the this fourth revolution, we could actually have control, or we're having a way out of it. So if you move away from that again, data, things about data interoperability that government is working on, we can actually even see non-inclusivity of South in the data used to training data set as an opportunity. So we can see that as a challenge, but the elephant in the house, which Ms. Margaret spoke to, is the infrastructure. And this range from power to internet connectivity to computing resources. And I can quickly speak to two of them, which the ministry is working on, which even Dr. Nkema has spoken of. The connectivity, if you look at it, is a major challenge because when you look at GSMA many reports, internet connectivity will play a key role in adoption of AI. But when you look at Nigeria, the broadband report says we need about 120,000 kilometers of broadband to get at least for us to be well covered. Now we presently have just 40,000. So the plan is to build this route massively. Now, because of time, I'm seeing time there, is the computing power. The computing power is the elephant in the house.
Okay.
And what we are doing is to go in partnership, and the key one we can look up is the partnership the federal government is having, which will be by GBB and 21st Century and NCAR to actually install some NVIDIA GPU that will enable researchers, students, and startups to do their computing.
Fantastic, fantastic. Dr. Ajala, I think you've done an incredibly awesome job. I mean, I must first of all start again by commending you and Honorable Minister Tijani on the very first commendable effort of pulling together over 120 Nigerians that actually brought in their skills and expertise in helping to create the groundswell and the wireframe for a national AI strategy for Nigeria. Now, thinking about these challenges, you've brought in some very huge elephants into the room. Absence of power, absence of computing resources, absence of internet connectivity, the current limitation in our broadband infrastructure. On the back of all of this are also constrained resources for funding that are competing with several other societal, social security, healthcare, and even food security needs. Permit me now to call on okay. I hope you all can still hear me.
Yes, go on, please.
Okay, Nicholas, are you there?
I'm there, yeah.
Yeah, I said, so what are your top 3 recommendations to Nigeria? Very quickly.
Yeah, very quickly. I promised it as my first answer was too long. The first recommendation is do a really broad matchmaking for an AI policy compared to your AI strategy. The second is don't copy one or the other, do a global matchmaking of all AI policy approaches that fit our both. And the third is maybe a little bit tricky, but I will make it. Think cross-border. Because if you will be now front runner in Nigeria, you will also have to deal later on with business relations, with political relations to other African countries. So what about maybe even thinking bigger and doing a blueprint for Africa in general with your AI policy?
Fantastic.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sonder. So Maggie, in 1 minute, can you also tell us, given your expertise in working with American businesses and understanding how American businesses have been instrumental in shaping the US global economy, what steps do you think we can actually take to build local capacity at all levels for AI adoption and AI utilization in Nigeria?
Well, I think the first thing is that, private sector companies, irrespective of whether they're US or not, but, it is an opportunity for investment. So investing in this digital and computing infrastructure, such as data centers, could be, and obviously high-speed internet could be a great way to collaborate on the growth of AI and the deployment of that in the country. But also, if you're going to see these investments, then you're going to have to consider, issues around incentives to kind of ramp up, the local AI landscape in Nigeria. So things, obviously, we know, it has become expensive for telecom, the sector to play as an example in the country. I think there's a lot that can be done with research and development. When I went before this panel, I went through and just to say that, to re-emphasize what Dr. Ajala said about, bringing, local expertise or trying to build a database of Nigerians in the diaspora, with a lot of great intellectual power bank, and being able to pull them together, for me, I think it's really a great work, that has been done by the ministry. And so we can also leverage existing US private sector companies to participate in AI research and development, collaborating with the academic institutions. I know, for instance, that Cisco renewed an MOU with NIDA recently to drive the Cybersecurity and AI Research Center, which is currently built up, and this could further enhance what we're looking at. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I know that there are other issues around promoting ethical practices, can leverage certain guidelines that have already been set to see how to produce and ensure transparency and accountability in AI applications, and so on and so forth. So training is great, research and development very important, collaboration between and with industry and academia is also super important. And investing in technology is important to ramp up, the local ecosystem of AI in Nigeria.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much.
very much. Please let's give our virtual panelists and moderator a warm round of applause. Thank you for that very insightful, engaging conversation. We're now going to move back to the hall. I see a few empty seats. Please just move forward if you see empty seats in front of you. So to my right, there are a few empty seats, some people at the back. If you could just move 1 or 2 rows. With the exception of the first and second row, please let's fill up the empty seats. We don't want people blocking each other's views. We want it for easy access and movement. Same thing to my left. There's a gentleman in green, a lady in red. If you could just move forward to the empty seats in front of you, we'll really appreciate that. Again, as you're posting on your social media platforms, let's continue to use the hashtags for this event. GTA Conference and GTA Conference 2020. 2024. We really appreciate your hashtags and also appreciate your tagging across the different social media platforms. Moving swiftly, we have a quick presentation, 10 minutes. Again, I implore all my speakers, panelists, moderators to just be very mindful of the time, and we are making it easier for you. So if you look